Luz, thank you for sharing. I just love the way you say Ross. Yeah.
Ross. Ross.
Now, like, just, I don't know, pretty. Did anybody remember Ricardo Montalban? That's, there are probably only a few of us in here who remember that. So
I think the same people that remember Wonder Woman.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, when I said anybody remember Ricardo Montalban, I looked over at Julie, but she wasn't paying attention to me.
I'm paying attention. I have no idea who he is.
Also, I'm very grateful for Julie going up and speaking and sharing your story.
That was awesome, yeah.
And it really is, we sometimes forget about ourselves, but we forget to invest in ourselves while we're taking care of everyone else.
Yeah.
But you can't pour from an empty pot. So I love that so much. So thank you for doing that yesterday.
Yeah, you did great.
Yeah, you did.
Heard a lot of positive feedback from that. So,
I appreciate
yeah.
that.
Yeah. My suspicion is that you are much better than you think you are.
Yeah.
When you're standing up there. Because you did a fantastic job.
Definitely
Yeah.
stepping out of my comfort zone for sure, but.
So just regarding Summit, one of the things we like to do the day after the Summit, normally it would be on Tuesday, we'd be doing this on Wednesday, but just any ahas, any takeaways from the Summit before we get started? Did you?
Oh, I was waving at Dave, but
Okay.
I was thinking from yesterday, what things are we telling ourselves? George asked.
Yeah.
That hit me between the eyes.
Yeah. Yeah. So what did you identify something you're telling yourself that isn't?
I think this
Isn't
week
empowering?
I'm gonna do a little journaling about that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. Okay. Anybody else? Anybody online? Any ahas? Any takeaways before we get started?
Well, I really pay attention when George was talking about what do we do when we are feeling low, or for some reason something is not working, and what do we do? He says to keep on keeping on. And I think that's really important, because I think as human beings we have ups and downs.
Yeah.
And when we are in the down one, what can we do? It's like swimming, right? If you go underwater, what do you do to keep to don't drown?
Keep on.
To keep your head above water, and that made me think that the strategies I'm using, and what can I do? What can I add to what I already do?
Yeah. Awesome. That's great. Yes, Dave.
Yeah, sorry to step on a second off this already talked about, but I think that what hit me the most, and I did have to step on that a little bit, but the biggest thing for me is just, are you awake? That's all. I mean, we're all doing decent. I mean, and I'm sure a lot of people are going through a lot of problems and stuff like that, but for the most part, we're just on cruise control. And so it really is, and it's so funny because I talk to so many agents, even on our team, and they get so frustrated because you keep, like, why are you doing this? What's your goals? Have you written them down? And everyone's kind of, I want to hear the hows, and it's like, it doesn't matter.
Right.
It does not matter, because if you're not awake enough to know that you're not doing what you need to be doing, you would already kind of know what you need to do if you knew where you were going. And I think that's the biggest deal.
That's
it's like,
so important.
we're all just kind of just cruise control, driving to work and realizing you just got in the parking lot.
It's like, what happened in
I didn't
between?
even remember driving here.
Right.
It's every day. What did we do last week? I don't even remember.
Yeah.
That's the thing I think.
Isn't that interesting?
I feel that's, you're right. I mean, yeah, because sometimes you've got so much going on in your mind and everything needs to be done that, yeah, you get here and you're like,
You're on autopilot.
you are. I'm like, was that light green? You know, I mean, it's like, you just get in your car and you just drive.
That's so funny. I have done that. It's like,
Oh, yeah.
was that red?
Yeah.
It probably was. So yeah. Yes, Ruby.
Yesterday I just had a couple of ahas, because it's when you have so much chaos, do you remember where you're going? And so just like you hit on it, Dave, and how much we plan a vacation. It's crazy how, we're going to go to Hawaii. We know exactly when we're going to go. We know who we're going to go with. We know how much money we need. We know what hotels we're going to stay, what activities we're going to do, but we don't really focus on the things that we need to do for our goals.
Yeah.
And we get lost in the everyday chaos and just the disparity that they were talking about. Sometimes things get really hard, and all of that chaos can come at you one time that you lose focus.
Yeah.
And I was telling Aubrey yesterday, it's right online, we were talking that when I'm not here in the morning, it really does throw my day off. Whether I'm listening, whether I'm doing something or not, it's become routine and it feeds my life. And so that chaos that you're able to clear, if you are in chaos, meet with somebody and just start thinking about priorities. And I just, sometimes you get lost in that, like I've had a tough week on a couple of personal fronts. And so sometimes that can cloud what you're doing. But if you keep going on a daily basis, like what you're striving for on a daily basis, it really does start to clear up automatically. But if you lose focus on what you're supposed to do, despite on how like you're feeling, it's just crazy how lost you can get.
Yeah, it's really important what you said. In fact, what I find is the most powerful thing that we can do is make certain that we force ourselves to get with people, to be around people, to have conversation, as opposed to withdraw, because that's what most people will do when they start to feel that way. They feel that panic, they withdraw.
Right.
You know, they pull into their cave, they get into the fetal position and hope that everything's going to be okay.
Yeah.
I wrote down while George was speaking that what habits do you have that are serving you? Because I'm a big believer in your routine is going to determine your outcome.
Yeah.
So if you make time for what's important to you, you know, it's such a positive thing to remind yourself of, that we all need motivation. I think it's Zig Ziglar who said motivation wears away. That's why we require it daily.
Yeah, it's like taking a shower.
Exactly.
We do it every day.
That's right.
Yeah, otherwise we start to stink. Yeah.
Exactly right.
Yep. You talked about stinking thinking. Yeah. All right. So in line with that, let me just, because this whole conversation is, just as you were talking, this wasn't what I was going to talk about, but I think it's appropriate based upon the conversation to be a nice segue too. But before we do that, let me very just quickly introduce Michael Pearson, right?
Yes, Michael Pearson.
Yes, Michael. So maybe tell us quickly about yourself
You
and
guys.
yeah, just very quickly, who are you? And
Yeah, I'm Michael Pearson. I'm 22. I am a single father. I have a baby boy that just moved back into town. He lived in St.
yeah,
So I get to see him a lot more.
Oh, nice.
that's
Nice.
great. How old is he?
He's 16 months.
Yeah.
Big
Oh,
times.
that's so amazing. You can
So-
be in the office anytime you want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, plenty of moms in here.
Yeah.
Yeah, moms in training. So yeah. So let's talk about this. So how many of you woke up this morning with a goal in mind? And I don't mean now that I'm asking you think, oh yeah, I could probably identify. And how many of you woke up this morning with the goal in the mind that you were going to accomplish today specifically? Anybody? Okay. So about half of you. That's okay. But what I want to do is I want to go through the process of talking about how to achieve a goal, maybe within the context of a historical story. Would that be okay? Okay. So at the end of World War II, well, to bring an end to World War II, what did the United States do? Anybody know? Drop not just one, but drop two bombs, one on Nagasaki and one on Hiroshima, right? And those two bombs in total, it took just seconds for those bombs to do what they did, but in total, there were over 200,000 people who died as a result of those bombs being dropped. And you think about that and you say, oh, that doesn't seem like a lot, but just imagine if we had 200,000 people in Salt Lake City instantly die as a result of an explosion. And what would be interesting is if that were to happen because of population density, it would be much more than that today. Those cities weren't as densely populated as, say, for example, Tokyo, where they could have dropped it. We didn't drop it there. But the Japanese during World War II lost nearly 3 million people in World War II. Do you know how many the United States lost during World War II? Just over 400,000. So to give you a perspective, the United States lost over 400,000. Japan lost nearly 3 million people. Their population was decimated, especially among the able-bodied men population. So that at the end of World War II, when Japan surrendered to the United States and to the Allies, they were absolutely devastated. They were devastated economically, they were devastated industrially, and they were devastated morally. I mean, they're just their emotions. I mean, think about that. To lose, Japanese are a very proud nation, a very proud people. The whole idea of kamikazes, right, giving up their life for victory. Good morning, Aubrey. Come on in. So at the end of World War II, Japan was in this situation, and they were at a point where they were trying to decide, okay, what's next? Well, what is interesting is about 1950, the leaders of Japan decided that they were going to try to become number one at something. They were trying to rebuild their infrastructure, their industry. So they decided what they were going to do is become number one in the manufacture of textiles, cloth, things that we use to make clothing. So they focused on that. And what they did, ultimately, number one, we're going to achieve a goal. Number one, we have to identify what? Identify the goal. So number one, identify the goal. And what am I doing with that particular step? What did I just do?
Writing it down.
I wrote it down. So what you do is you identify the goal and you what? Write it down. So what I would suggest that you do is a goal that you want to achieve today. I want you to write it down. Write down the goal that you're going to achieve today. It can be something as simple as, I've been meaning to call that client. I've been meaning to call that person in my SOI. I've been meaning to make those 5 contacts with my SOI and I haven't done that yet. Whatever the goal is, today I'm going to set an appointment. Maybe it's, I'm going to identify a short-term, medium-term, or long-term goal, and I'm going to put together that plan. Whatever it is, I want you to identify the goal, and I want you to write it down. So that's what the Japanese did. They basically identified their goal, and this is what they said. They said, we're going to become the #1 manufacturer of textiles in the entire world. Now, guess what happened by the end of the 1950s? Japan became the #1 manufacturer of textiles in the entire world. Interesting to go from being defeated in World War II to the extent that they did, absolutely being decimated, then becoming #1 in the manufacture of textiles in the entire world. And comparing that against the might of the United States or Great Britain or any other great nation that wasn't decimated the way they were, and to have them accomplish that, a pretty significant thing. Wouldn't you agree? Yeah. Right? So they identified that goal, but in the process of doing that, they had to identify what? And they said they were going to do it within what period of what? Period of time. So the second thing is that they identified the what? The deadline to achieve it. Now I've asked you to write down your goal that you're going to achieve when? Today. But this process that I'm talking about will apply to any time frame. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter the goal. It could be a small goal. It could be a lifetime goal. It could be that big audacious goal that you have, that you had when you were a kid, that finally, this is the thing that I want to accomplish. So you identify the goal and you write it down. Then you identify the deadline, and what do you do with that? Write it down. So that goal that I've asked you to identify that you're going to achieve today, I want you to identify the deadline for today. Is it going to be 10 o'clock this morning? Is it going to be noon? Is it going to be 3 o'clock? Is it 5 o'clock? Is it by midnight? It doesn't matter what the deadline is as long as you understand what? That there's a deadline. Now, what's the importance of this? Well, let's talk about these first two things. If we identify the goal and we write it down, when we identify the goal, it gives us what?
Clarity.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It gives us focus and clarity. And that's the challenge. That's what we talked about. Most people wake up absolutely confused, living by what? By habit, doing the same thing that they did what? Yesterday, and at best hoping that somehow today is going to be what? And it isn't. There's no way it's going to be different if we don't change our what? We don't change our habits, and there's no way to change our habits unless we identify something that we want, and then identify the deadline, and then this is what the Japanese did. They said, well, if we were able to do that, if we were able to say we want to become the #1 manufacturer of textiles, and we could accomplish that, what's the next thing that we want to do? So then they decided that they wanted to become the #1 manufacturer of steel in the entire world. Now this is what's interesting about that. Japan is an island nation. And guess what the two primary components are of steel? What do you need primarily to manufacture steel? There are many things, but what do you think the two primary things are? In order to heat the iron ore, which is the first thing that you need, heat it up to a point that it would do what? That it would melt. What do you have to have?
Coal.
You have to have coal. Well, guess what Japan doesn't have any of?
Coal.
Ore. They don't have those two things. So they had this, what's that?
Please do that again.
Really? You want to see my impersonation again? I used to do this for the kids all the time. I got plenty more. Stick around. Try the video. I'll be here all week. So now you got me way off track, Julie. I didn't know what the hell we were talking about. What we were talking about? Ore, yeah. So they have no coal, they have no ore. So which means they have to do what? They have to import all of that. Well, guess where they imported it from? Places like the United States, right? Well, guess who was the number one manufacturer of steel in the world at that point, about 1960?
United States.
Yeah, the United States. What Japan did, they said, well, the United States are building all of these what? And so if they're building all of these cars, got that huge consumer base, these war heroes coming back and buying all their homes and having all of their what? Their babies, the baby boomers, right? The largest population, post World War II. They're having all of these babies. Those babies are going to be buying what? Cars. We're going to provide the steel that's needed to manufacture those cars because we know there's going to be a market for it. So that's what they did. They said, we're going to become the number one manufacturer of steel in the entire world by the end of the 1960s. Well, guess who became the number one manufacturer of steel in the world by the end of the 1960s? Japan. Very interesting. And they didn't have iron ore or coal in the nation. They had to import it. So I want you to think about that. Think about your goal, whether it's the one today or the one that you want to accomplish over the next year, or the next 3 years, or 5 years, and you come up with all the excuses as to why it's not possible, and yet Japan was able to become number one in the manufacture of textiles, but more impressively of steel, and they didn't have the implements that are needed to do that, and they had to import it. And they overtook the United States, which was the world superpower. It was the nation, and yet they overcame that. Pretty incredible, right? Okay. So then the next thing that you do, if we identify the goal, we write it down. We identify the deadline and write it down. What do you think the next step is? Kind of gave it away. Japan didn't have any what?
Resources.
They didn't have any resources. They didn't have the iron or they didn't have the coal. So what they did is they identified the obstacles. What's going to get in the what? Yeah, they asked the question, what's going to get in the way? Well, we don't have any iron ore, we don't have any coal. So then therefore, see what they did is they set their what? They set their expectations as to what they would have to overcome in order to achieve their goal. Okay? So then the next step was this. They identified what? If you have challenges or obstacles, then what should you do?
Solution.
Yeah. Identify the what? Identify the solution. So that's what they did. They identified the solutions.
Can you just see the room when whoever it was that came up with that idea came in and presented that?
Yeah. It's like,
And said, you guys figure out how to make this work.
Right.
We're gonna be the lead industry in
Right.
steel, and everyone's like,
have you lost your
what are
mind?
you talking
Yeah.
about?
Well, it's the same thing that they did with John Kennedy when we were having a hard time putting a satellite into space orbiting around the globe. He said, we're going to put a man on the moon. And they looked at him like, have you lost your mind? He said, no, we're going to do this. And that's exactly what he did. He said, gentlemen, ladies, what are the obstacles? And they started to enumerate them. We don't have a rocket. We don't have the fuel. We don't have the all the technology they talked about. He said, great. Now you know what the obstacles are. Now all we have to do is find the what? He says, so now your job is to make certain you find the solutions. And if we do that, then we're going to get there. And that's exactly what they did. Yes.
Well, I think yesterday George said Los Angeles was a 3-year decision before it happened.
Right.
Why do you think that the Japanese chose textiles first? Do you think they had a plan of this will be easy to start with, then it will give us money to do the second thing?
Yeah, it was certainly easier, without a doubt. Yeah, I think they looked at the resources that they had and they said, okay, this is what we have. Let's start with this.
And relating that to us.
Yes, it's a really good question. Well, it goes to the point that Dave said. He said, stop trying to figure out the how and just start taking action. Look at what you have. Look what's available. And the number one thing that I would say, whether you're an LO or you're a real estate agent, the number one resource that you have is what? What's our job?
So, wait.
It's not to sell homes, because we don't sell homes. Homes sell homes.
Yeah.
That's a fact.
Relationship.
It's communication. It's talk to people. Your number one asset in this business is what? It's your sphere of influence. That's your primary resource. It really is. That is your primary resource. And if you recognize that and you leverage that resource, then that's where you begin to move the needle. So that's what I would say, Greg. That's how I would liken it. I would say that's your textile. That's your closest, most obvious answer to success in real estate is that. It's your sphere of influence.
Yeah, the great example about the rocket. So when somebody made that decision and everybody else is like, oh my gosh, this is ridiculous, now I have to go find this, and I have to go find this. But no matter how difficult it is, they know they have a job to do. So they go and find those resources, and they go and try to communicate. And when they do achieve, saying, hey, it is possible.
Yeah.
So we're gonna do this. And it's crazy how it takes a village to make a decision happen.
Yeah,
And it's just funny, it just reminds me of school sometimes, like, oh, you're gonna write an essay on this, so you better study this. And like, oh, you're grunting and complaining, but the more you learn, the more you know, the
And you
more
wrote-
you have
Yes.
the results. And then when it's successful, like, oh, I got an A in that class. But somebody had to start the idea of you learning
yeah.
something new.
I talked about it a couple of days ago at the Everest coaching event,
Yeah.
where I talked about the idea that if you believe you can, you can. If you believe you can't, you can't. Our reticular activation system will cause us to look for evidence of whatever it is that we believe. So if you believe it's not possible, you will look for justification of that position. But if you believe that it's possible, then you will look for justification that what? That you can do it. And as a result, you'll spend your time being very resourceful, finding the ways to overcome the obstacles. Those are called the what? Those are the solutions. Make sense?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Any thoughts, questions, observations? Yes.
Henry Ford's quote, whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right.
Either way, you're correct.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. So the Japanese then, at the end of the 1960s, became the number one what? Manufacturer of steel.
I drove one.
Yeah, a lot of Americans started to in the 1970s. There you go. Was it a Corolla?
Corona.
Oh, that's right. I knew that. I meant to say that. Corona. Yes. Those are really cool cars, actually.
It's very dependable.
Yeah. They're actually very collectible now. Yeah. So at the end of the 1960s, the Japanese became the number one manufacturer of steel. Well, here's what they did. They said, we're manufacturing all of this steel and we're sending it over to the what?
West.
To the United States, to the West. And what are they doing with the steel?
Cars.
They're making cars. They said, well, why don't we, instead of sending all of our steel over to the West, why don't we start using it in the manufacture of Coronas? And that's exactly what they did, not the beer. So they started to manufacture cars. They said, we're going to become the number one manufacturer of cars in the world. Guess who became the number one manufacturer of cars in the world? Japan. They then went on to say, well, if we've done this, if we've done textiles, if we've done steel, if we've done automobiles, any of you who have perspective, there, I would say 90% of us in the room, maybe 80% might not have the perspective. But what did Japan become number one in the 1980s? I'll check these two. Do you know?
Technology.
Is that what you're going to say?
I was gonna say, yeah, technology, I mean, right now, there you go.
Boom boxes.
Boom boxes, the Walkman, right? Technology. Yeah, it was technology. Electronics specifically. So they became the number one manufacturer of textiles, of steel, of automobiles, and of technology. And they did that successfully, decade after decade after decade after decade. How did they do it? Well, this is what they did. They identified the goal and they wrote it down. They identified the deadline and they wrote it down. They identified the obstacles and then they identified the solutions to those obstacles. And then number 5, all they did is they put together a what? They put together a plan. The next step is what? You have a plan, now what? Execute. Close.
Write it down.
In every case, yes, write it down. There's something that's missing here. We can say that we have a goal. We can say that there's a deadline. We can identify the obstacles. We can even identify the solutions. We can even say that we have a plan. But in order to, what did you say? Execute. I call that Nike. What does Nike say?
Just do it.
Just do it. In order to just do it, it requires what? Now, have you ever set a goal, maybe tried it for a while, and then what did you do?
This is.
Gave up. Why did you give up? Could be.
Fun.
I think that it has to do with this. The fuel. Yeah. In other words, the why. Identify why you want to do it. There are two primary emotions in life. From the time that you pop out of your mama's womb to the time that you are put in the ground. There are two primary emotions. What are they?
Love and fear.
Love and fear. Those two. Every single day we battle in hopes that we fall on the side of what? Love. If you can identify reasons as to why you will accomplish your goals, identify the deadline, recognize the obstacles, have the foresight to create the solutions, put together the plan, and ultimately take action and do it when? Now and as long as it what? As long as it takes. That if you have the mental, physical, and emotional what? Fuel. It's not a question of will you achieve the goal? It's really only a question of what? Of when. It's what George said yesterday. Just keep on what? I thought it was very interesting that he used that keep on keeping on, because that took me right back to the 1970s. And you're talking about Wonder Woman. I'm thinking, well, this is a nostalgic message, right? But to keep on keeping on, it's really identifying your why, your purpose, the passion. Why is it important to you? And the key is, if you don't identify it, for Japan, what do you think that it was in the beginning? And really throughout the process. A nation that had been devastated, decimated. What do you think their reason was? Yeah, but why? The Japanese are very what? They're very proud. They're very competitive. They were, I guarantee it. I guarantee it didn't have anything to do with cloth. It didn't have anything to do with steel. It didn't have anything to do with an automobile. It didn't have anything to do with electronics. It had to do with national pride. Who they are. Their comeback. This is who we are. We're resilient. We're fighters. We're competitors. And it was that caused them to do what it took in order to achieve those things. So the thing that I would leave you with is this. Every single day we get the opportunity to choose whether we're going to be on the side of fear and being controlled by that, being chased by it ultimately, versus on the side of love, our passions, our purpose, having absolute clarity of what we intend to accomplish and why it's important to us, who we want to become and the people we want to impact in the life ultimately that we want to live. And every day we get the opportunity to wake up and choose that, to choose what is it that I'm going to accomplish today. And it's those incremental goals that over time that compound, that build ultimately the person that you want to be, to live the what? To live the life that you want to live. It's really, is this a complicated process? It really isn't. The issue is making certain that you have the motivation on a daily basis to actually what? To actually do it.
I can make it
Yes. Yeah, go ahead, please.
No, I was just saying I can make it complicated if I want to, or I could keep it simple and just do what I need to do.
I think we do. Yeah, I mean, I think real estate is a very simple business. I think mortgages is a very simple business. But what I think we do is we have a tendency to what? We have a tendency to complicate it. We go to, how am I going to do it? How is none of your business?
Yeah.
They didn't know how they were going to put a man on the moon. Japan didn't know how they were going to do it. They simply put together a plan and they what? They executed on it. So I always say this, everybody is born with a flashlight. What do you mean they're born with a flashlight? I didn't have a flashlight when I was born. I'm talking about figuratively. Everybody has a flashlight. And some people's flashlight shines just a little bit further down the pathway. Some don't shine quite as much. But it doesn't really matter how far your flashlight shines down the pathway, that dark pathway. Imagine you're walking a pathway at night that you've never been on, and you have your flashlight. It shines how many feet in front of you? 15, 20 feet, maybe, right? If you've got an average flashlight. The only way for you to see further down that pathway is to do what? Take a step. If you don't take a step, you will never see any further than you presently see. So the whole question of, well, how do I do it? I watch people get ready to get ready, so they'll be ready when they're what? When they're ready. And the problem is with those people, they're never ready. They never take the action, and so therefore they never achieve any of their goals. They just simply live to get by. I saw a hand up.
I was just gonna say, just, you already said the metaphor is, if you take the first step, the staircase appears.
Right.
But if you don't take the first step, you're just afraid of how high you're gonna go. And you know, the chaos, it was funny when I was talking about it. Sometimes when we think about our goal, okay, what is it that I really want? And they're, oh, maybe I want this, and maybe I want that, or well, I have to do this to get that, so maybe I want something else. So they're not clear on what they want. You know, my family sometimes asks me, who does real estate at 7 a.m? Why are you going to work at 7 a.m? And I said, because I want to. You know, it becomes a want versus a discipline if I have
Right.
to.
I don't have to do it. I want to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, why? Who goes to real estate offices like we do? come in and see why we do what we do.
It's so important. I mean, how many of you have ever been in a situation at any point in your life where you were excited about getting up to do that thing? Right? We can identify with that. Maybe it was a vacation, that's fine. But have you ever had a job or a task where you felt really excited? I really want to do this. Yes? Come on. Yeah. I will tell you the reason for that is you have found some reason at a deep level, personally, on the side of love, that side of the ledger, love, passion, purpose, why, that caused you to be that way. So the key is every single day to identify, why is this important to me? Not on a logical level, because we all know if I were to ask you, how many of you would like to be a millionaire? How many of you would say yes? Right, but how many people are? Very few. Well, why? Is it a mystery on how to do it? No, it isn't a mystery. It's not a mystery in real estate. It's not a mystery in mortgages. We know how to do it. It's not a question of whether we know how to do it. It's a question of whether we're what? We're willing to do it. And once you have enough purpose, passion, and why, the rest of it will take care of itself, because you'll show up and you'll become what? Resourceful. You'll figure it out. But those who are purposeful, passionate, and have an absolute deep understanding inside why, they won't find the solutions. They'll find the what? They find the excuses. And we get to choose every single day which person we're going to be, the person who finds the solutions or the person who finds the excuses. So, any thoughts, observations, any amens?
Amen.
Any donations to the tin? Did you bring it? We'll pass it around.
Amen.
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 Thank you, Al. Appreciate it. All right. Well, having said that, let's finish up with some closing affirmations. Great job on being here. Beautiful day out there. I think it's going to be about 50 today, but close to 60 tomorrow degrees, 60 degrees.